Soldiers laughed at her during drill. 90 seconds later, she disarmed all 5 barehanded. The laughter started before she had crossed the mat. That was the morning of March 4th, 1987, at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The close-quarters combat drill had been scheduled for 0600. By 0550, the gymnasium was already close and warm, smelling of canvas and rubber and whatever men sweat when they think the day is going to be easy. Specialist Ruth Calloway walked through the double doors at 0558, kit bag over one shoulder, boots still carrying the red clay of the parking lot. She was 24 years old, had been training in combatives for 6 years. Nobody in that gymnasium knew the second part. They knew the first. She was a woman. That was enough. Sergeant First Class Dennis Howell ran the hand-to-hand program for 2nd Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment. He had been doing it for 9 years, had trained over 300 soldiers. When Ruth walked in and stood in line with the 5 men scheduled for the disarm sequence drill, Howell looked at her clipboard without looking at her. Told her she had the wrong room. Ruth showed him her orders. Howell read them twice, handed them back without a word. The 5 men she was assigned to drill against were not selected at random. Private First Class Eddie Mack stood 6 feet 2 inches and weighed 211 pounds. He had placed second at the post-wide combatives tournament the previous October. The others, Reyes, Tolliver, Burnett, Sparks, averaged 193 pounds each. All 4 had at least 2 years of Army combatives training. Sergeant Howell had put the roster together himself. He did not say why. Didn't need to. The drill format was simple. A single defender stands in the center. 5 attackers approach one at a time, each armed with a rubber training knife. The defender must disarm each attacker before the next steps in. Standard allotted time, 4 minutes. Failing to disarm an attacker in 45 seconds resets the clock. 2 resets and the drill ends. Standard completion rate for experienced soldiers in the drill, roughly 60%. Ruth set her kit bag against the south wall, rolled both wrists twice, stood in the center of the mat. Mack came first. He moved in from the right, training knife low and tight to his forearm the way the manual prescribed. Ruth watched his elbow. Not the knife, not his face. The elbow. She had learned to watch the elbow 6 years ago at a community center in Fayetteville, Tennessee, from a retired Army Ranger named Leonard Goss, who charged $14 a session and accepted payment in cash or in help stacking chairs. Mack was 4 feet away when she stepped left, brought her right forearm down against his wrist, rotated in, and had the knife out of his hand before his body weight had registered the change. 7 seconds. Nobody laughed after that. Nobody said anything at all. Reyes came in at a different angle. He had watched what happened to Mack and adjusted. Came in higher, blade angled toward the throat. Ruth slipped inside, used his own forward momentum against his wrist joint, two-handed, and the knife clattered on the rubber mat before he had completed the step. 11 seconds. Tolliver came in fast. Burnett came in slow. Sparks tried a feint, shifting the knife from right hand to left mid-approach. Ruth read all 3 the same way she had been trained to read them. Watch the shoulder, watch the elbow, step off line before the hand matters. The last disarm, Sparks, took 31 seconds because he feinted twice and she let him, measuring both fakes before she moved. When she did move, it was once. The knife hit the mat at 0612. The entire sequence had taken 90 seconds. Sergeant First Class Howell wrote something on his clipboard. He did not approach her. Did not say anything to the 5 men standing on the edge of the mat. Dismissed the session 14 minutes early and walked to his office in the back of the gymnasium. Ruth picked up her kit bag, left the way she came in. She had started learning at 18, not from the Army, not from any official program. From Leonard Goss, who had retired out of 5th Special Forces Group in 1979 after 22 years, and who ran his combatives class out of a rented room behind a Fayetteville laundromat. The room had 2 mats on the floor, a speed bag nobody used, and a hand-drawn chart on the wall showing arm-lock progressions in blue marker. The chart was dated 1983 in Goss's handwriting. Ruth had started attending in August of 1985, 6 months before she enlisted. Goss charged the $14 per session, and was the only instructor she ever trained with who did not ask her why she was there. Every other program she had tried, the community recreation class at the Y, a weekend seminar put on by a retired police officer, a Saturday session at a karate school in Lewisburg, had started with some version of the same question. The instructors asked differently. The intent was the same. They were asking if she understood what she was getting herself into. Goss did not ask. On her first session, he told her to stand on the left mat and showed her the elbow rule. 3 sessions later, he told her she was watching the wrong part. By December, she had 52 hours of work logged. She kept a notebook. Goss had told her to, not because he required it. Because he said the notebook would outlast the muscle memory when the muscle memory got overwritten by fear and fatigue. She still had the notebook. Spiral bound, blue cover, $1.19 from the Kroger on Elk Avenue. She had filled the first one by February of 1986. Started the second one in March. When she enlisted in September of 1986, her recruiter at the Fayetteville station was a staff sergeant named Torrance. He was polite, went through the forms carefully. When he got to the section on physical training background, she mentioned the combatives' work. Torrance wrote something down, paused, and told her the Army had its own combatives curriculum, implied she would receive that training in due course. Did not ask for more detail about the Goss sessions. Ruth did not offer it. Fort Bragg was 37 miles from the laundromat room. She drove it twice a week for the first 3 months after arriving at her duty station, until Goss told her she was ready to train on her own and that more sessions with him would only make her repeat what she already knew instead of building past it. He said it without ceremony, handed her the chart from the wall, the blue marker one, dated 1983. Told her to take it. She took it. The drill report from March 4th was filed by Sergeant First Class Howell on March 6th. It documented the session, the participants, and the completion of the 5-attacker disarm sequence. Under the Performance Notes section, Howell had written 2 sentences. Sequence completed in 90 seconds. Attacker count, 5. That was all. The report went to Captain James Wilder, company commander. Wilder read it on March 9th. Called Howell in. Howell confirmed the account. Wilder asked if there had been any safety issues. Howell said no. Wilder asked if he wanted to recommend any follow-up. Howell said no. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Wilder initialed the report and filed it. What happened next had nothing to do with official channels. Burnett told Reyes at dinner on the 5th. Reyes told 3 people from a different platoon on the morning of the 6th. By the 9th, the story had moved through 2 battalions and acquired details it had not started with. She had broken Mac's wrist. She had not. She had trained with Ranger School cadre. She had not. Howell had written her up for using an unauthorized technique. He had not. The actual version, 90 seconds and 5 clean disarms, had traveled the same corridors. Most soldiers, on hearing both versions, believed the embellished one was the real one, and the real one was understated. Ruth heard versions of the story come back to her for the next 2 weeks. She did not correct them when they were close. She did not bother with the ones that weren't. She kept training. Mornings, 0500. The far edge of the parade ground where the grass hadn't been cut back to the fence line, and the ground was slightly soft from the February rains. She worked the elbow sequences against a fence post she had wrapped in canvas and duct tape in November. 40 minutes every morning. The post was 3.5 inches in diameter. She had measured it herself. On March 21st, Howell stopped her outside the battalion supply room and told her, without preamble, that she was scheduled for the advanced disarm sequence the following Tuesday. 8 attackers. 3 armed with knives, 2 with batons, 3 with sidearms. Time limit, 6 minutes. Ruth asked what the standard completion rate was for the 8 attacker sequence. Howell said 22%. She nodded and walked on. The session on March 25th was not a surprise to anyone. Word had moved faster than the formal scheduling. By 0555, there were 31 soldiers in the gymnasium who had not been assigned to the session. They stood along the north and west walls. Sergeant First Class Howell did not clear them out. He did not acknowledge them. Ruth stood in the center of the mat at 0600. The 8 attackers came in the sequence Howell had designated. Mac again, this time with a baton. Reyes with a training pistol. 6 others from different squads, none of whom she had trained with or against before March 4th. Howell had specifically pulled men she had not worked with. She understood why. She would have done the same. The first attacker cleared in 9 seconds, the second in 14. The third, Reyes with the sidearm, the hardest technique in the sequence, in 22 seconds. The sidearm disarm required inside deflection before contact, which meant committing before knowing for certain which line Reyes would press. Ruth committed at 4 feet. She was right about the line. She usually was. By the 4th attacker, the gymnasium was very quiet. The full sequence ran 4 minutes and 41 seconds. The completion rate for the 8 attacker sequence was 22%. Ruth became the 3rd soldier in 2nd Battalion's recorded history to complete it in under 5 minutes. The first 2 had been male soldiers with combined Army combatives training of 6 and 9 years, respectively. She had been in the Army for 6 months and 19 days. Howell wrote the report the same afternoon. This time he used 4 sentences. The 4th sentence read, "Recommend advanced combatives evaluation at post level." Wilder approved the recommendation on March 27th. The post-level evaluation took place on April 14, 1987, at the main post gymnasium on Ardennes Street. 2 evaluators flew in from Fort Benning. Sergeant Major Archie Devereux, who had written 2 chapters of the Army's Combatives Manual in 1981, and Captain Linda Rhodes of the Women's Integration Training Committee. Rhodes was the only person in the gymnasium that day who did not seem surprised when Ruth walked in. The evaluation was not a single drill. It was 9 separate assessments run across 4 hours. Technique isolation, sequence performance, stress drills with time pressure, and a final open format session where Ruth chose her own technique responses rather than following prescribed sequences. Devereux evaluated with a clipboard and a stopwatch and said nothing for the first 3 hours. At the start of the open format session, he told Ruth she had 45 minutes and that he was looking for decision-making under uncertainty, not technique execution. Ruth asked one question. She asked if the attackers knew what she would do. Devereux said no. Ruth said good. The open format session ran the full 45 minutes. She worked against 6 evaluator-assigned opponents, all of them from the Benning demonstration team, all of them trained in the current Army curriculum to a level she had not yet encountered in 6 months at Bragg. The session was not clean. The 4th attacker, A specialist named Garner, who had a 5-inch reach advantage and the fastest hands she had faced that day, caught her left forearm on the outside on his second approach. It left a bruise the color of a plum that took 9 days to fade. She disarmed him anyway. Different technique than planned. Read the adjustment mid-motion. When Devereux closed his clipboard at the end of the session, he asked her who had trained her. Ruth told him about Goss, the laundromat room, the $14 a session, the blue chart, the notebooks. Devereux wrote down the name Leonard Goss and did not ask her anything else. His written evaluation filed to post command on April 17th. The summary section was 11 lines. The final line read, "Recommend immediate enrollment in advanced instructor track." Nobody at the Fayetteville laundromat room had asked Leonard Goss whether Ruth would amount to anything. Goss would not have answered that question in any direction. He did not predict outcomes. He had told her that in the second session. Said prediction was a way of deciding before you knew. Said it was the fastest way to train yourself to stop watching. Goss found out what had happened at Fort Bragg from his cousin, who worked at the post PX, and heard it from a soldier who had been in the gymnasium on March 4th. The information arrived in late March, second-hand and slightly garbled. Goss's cousin told him a female soldier had disarmed 5 men in a training drill, and they were talking about it at the post. Didn't know her name. Said she was from somewhere in Tennessee. Goss had 3 students from Tennessee at that time. He worked out which one it was from the description of the technique. The elbow watch. He had taught it the same way for 11 years, and only one of his current students had picked it up as a primary read rather than a backup. He knew it was Ruth on the second day after hearing. He did not contact her. She was trained. She was working. Contacting her would have been for his benefit, not hers. He put the information away and went back to his sessions. She called him in June of 1987. Told him about the post-evaluation, about Devereux and the instructor track recommendation. Asked him one question. She asked if he thought the Army curriculum would undo what he had built. Goss said no. Said she had spent too many hours with the foundation for the surface to matter. Said the Army would add vocabulary. The grammar was already set. She thanked him. He told her to keep the notebook current. Hung up. The advanced instructor track ran from August 1987 to February 1988. 6 months, 11 days, 43 students. Ruth was the only woman. She was not the youngest. Private Dolan was 22 and had 4 years of wrestling. She was not the strongest. Specialist Carver was 6'4" and had been lifting since he was 15. She finished 3rd in the class. The 2 men ahead of her had prior combatives instructor experience from previous assignments. What the final assessment record showed, in the specifics, was this. In the stress drill component, the one that most closely replicated the March 4th scenario, Ruth scored the highest of the 43 students. Highest by 4 points. The stress drill involved unknown attacker sequences under time pressure, with evaluator-assigned modifications introduced mid-sequence. Modifications designed to force real-time technique adjustment. She had been adjusting in real time since the laundromat room. Since the 4th session with Goss, when he had changed the attack angle without warning, and she had fallen. She had fallen 3 times that session. The 4th time, she had not fallen. She had read the change at the elbow and stepped offline before the contact arrived. That was the thing about the elbow watch. Once you trained it in, you couldn't stop seeing it. Every arm told you where it was going before the hand got there. Ruth had seen it so many times by 1988 that she no longer thought about it. The read arrived before the thought. She graduated the instructor track on February 9th, 1988, Devereux attended the graduation. He was not required to. He had flown in from Benning specifically. He did not make a speech. He stood in the back of the room during the ceremony and left before the reception. Ruth noticed him leave. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. She taught at Fort Bragg from March 1988 to December 1991. 3 years and 9 months. In that time, she ran the Close Quarters Combat Program for a total of 6 companies, trained 218 soldiers in the basic sequence and 47 in the advanced sequence. She kept records. The notebooks had become a habit she could not break and did not try to. By 1991, she had filled 11 of them, all spiral-bound, blue cover. She bought them in packs of 4 from whatever post exchange was nearby. The 47 soldiers she trained in the advanced sequence had a completion rate of 71% on the 8-attacker drill. The post average before her program, 22%. The same 22% Howell had cited in March of 1987. She introduced 2 changes to the standard teaching sequence. The first was the elbow watch as a primary read rather than a secondary one. The second was a drill she designed herself, derived from something Goss had shown her in the 3rd month of training. She called it the offset entry. It required the defender to commit to a line half a beat before standard timing. Felt wrong to every student the first 8 to 12 sessions. Felt automatic by session 20. Howell attended one of her advanced sessions in October of 1989. He stood at the back of the gymnasium and watched for 40 minutes. Did not introduce himself to any of the students. Did not speak to Ruth before he left. 3 weeks later, she received a formal commendation from the Battalion S3 shop. The commendation did not mention Howell's name. Ruth read it once and filed it. Leonard Goss closed the laundromat room in November of 1990. His landlord raised the monthly rate from $180 to $280, and Goss declined to pay the difference. He moved his 2 mats to the garage of the house he rented on Elk Avenue, 4 blocks from the Kroger where Ruth had bought her first notebook. He ran sessions out of the garage from December 1990 until March of 2001, when his right knee required surgery and the recovery took longer than expected. He trained approximately 140 more students in that time. He charged the same $14 a session throughout. He raised it to $18 in 1997 when the knee started giving him trouble during demonstrations, and felt bad enough about it that he told every student in the class before he changed the price. Ruth sent him a card every December, a plain card, no imagery, with a summary of the year inside. She did not write much, usually a paragraph. The year's numbers, students trained, sessions run, notes on technique adjustments she was working through. Goss never wrote back. She did not expect him to. He was not a letter writer. She was not writing for a reply. In December of 1991, she wrote in the card that she was leaving Fort Bragg. Reassignment to Fort Leavenworth for a curriculum development role in the combatives program. She noted the November completion rate for the advanced sequence among her final cohort, 74%. She wrote that she thought it could reach 80% with a modified entry sequence in weeks 3 and 4 of the course. She was right about that. It reached 79% in 1994 and 81% in 1996. The blue chart from the laundromat wall traveled with her. All of it. The Bragg years, the Leavenworth assignment, a rotation through Fort Jackson in 1993, back to Bragg in 1995. The chart had been folded and unfolded enough times that the crease lines were soft and one corner had separated from the main sheet. She repaired it with clear tape in 1994. The blue marker had not faded. Goss had used a permanent marker. He used permanent markers for everything worth writing down. In 1998, when the Army began a formal review of its close quarters combat curriculum, Ruth was one of 7 instructors invited to the review panel at Fort Benning. She was the only woman on the panel. She was the only instructor who had trained under a non-Army program before enlisting. At the first panel session, one of the other instructors, a master sergeant from 10th Mountain Division with 17 years of combatives experience, asked her where she had learned her baseline technique. Not unkindly, with genuine curiosity, she told him about Goss, the laundromat room, the $14, the blue chart. The master sergeant wrote Goss's name in his notebook. The panel met 4 times over 18 months. The revised curriculum published in September of 2000 incorporated the elbow watch as a primary read in the basic sequence. It did not attribute the change to any individual. It rarely does. The change was simply there, worked into the language of the new manual, the way methods always migrate when they prove themselves, quietly, through the work itself, without ceremony. Ruth Calloway retired from the Army in June of 2003. 16 years and 9 months of service. E7, Sergeant First Class. She drove from Fort Bragg to Fayetteville, Tennessee the following week. Not to Leonard Goss's house directly, she drove past it. The garage door was down. The driveway was clear. She kept going. She stopped at the Kroger on Elk Avenue. Bought a 4-pack of spiral notebooks, blue cover. $1.19 each in 1985. $2.49 each in 2003. She put them in the back seat and drove home. She opened a training program in a rented commercial space in Fayetteville in September of 2003. She charged $20 a session. She taught the elbow watch in the second class of every beginner cohort. In the first class, she taught them to fall and not to mind it. That had been the first lesson Goss had given her. Though he had not said it directly, he had said it through the floor, through the mat. Through the 3 times she had fallen in session 4 before she had stopped falling. She still had all 12 notebooks. The blue chart from the laundromat wall hung on the east wall of the training room in Fayetteville, behind the speed bag she had bought secondhand from a gym closure in 2004. A new student asked about it in the spring of 2006. Wanted to know where it came from, who had drawn it. Ruth told them the name. Leonard Goss, $14 a session. Behind a laundromat on Elk Avenue. The student wrote the name down. The elbow watch still works. Always did. Still teaching it. Still the same rule Goss drew on that chart in 1983. Watch the elbow, not the hand. Step offline before the contact arrives. The hand tells you what already happened. The elbow tells you what's coming.